A very weird thing is happening. The very turbulent American election saw President Biden step down as his party's nominee to be replaced by his vice president, Kamala Harris. Former President Trump selected J.D. Vance to be his running mate. As part of the Democratic campaign, they started using the label weird to describe Vance for various comments he's made throughout the years.
Well, it's just plain weird.
This leads to weird policies.
That is weird behavior.
More extreme, more weird, more erratic.
I mean, on the other side, they're just weird.
The 32 ounces of weird.
Donald Trump and his weirdo running mate.
And by the way, they are weird.
And this label of weird seems to be getting under the skin of a lot of right-wing commentators.
I didn't think weird. Most people don't see that when they see Donald Trump.
So on my show today, I talked a little bit about the sort of weird slur and the fact that they're using this.
Do you think that's effective? Is anyone going to say, oh, I'm not going to vote for that guy because everyone says he's weird?
There are a couple of reasons why this has worked so well. The first obvious one is that it's true. As a quick example, there was a recent story from the Paris Olympics that saw numerous right-wing accounts online accuse Algerian boxer Iman Khif of secretly being a man after her opponent, Italian boxer Angela Carini, withdrew from their match within the first minute. Khif had previously been disqualified from the 2023 World Championships. The International Boxing Association, which had been governing the World Championships, had claimed that she'd failed an eligibility test. Here's how an AP article describes it. Khif had previously competed without issues and was disqualified by the sport's governing body only after she defeated Russian boxer Azalia Emeneva in the 2023 tournament. The IBA is controlled by Umar Kremlev, who is Russian and bought the state-owned energy supplier Gazprom as its primary sponsor and moved much of the governing body's operations to Russia. The article goes on to describe how little transparency there's been around these tests, and also describes how the International Boxing Association has been banned from the Olympics since 2019. Going more into Khif's personal history, she was assigned as female at birth, and as far as we know, has always identified that way. Family photos of her have been shown on Algerian TV, which clearly show her as a little girl. Her first major tournament was back in 2018, and she competed without any issues in the Olympics in Tokyo. This is a story of a woman who has competed in boxing without any issues for years and was eliminated by one specific governing body that operates within a different rubric than the IOC, which runs the Olympics. The only reason this whole story has gotten so much attention, though, is the absolute uproar that happened online from right-wing figures who decided to weigh in on this, from Donald Trump to Giorgia Meloni, and of course, a number of different commentators who were leaping to conclusions about the gender identity of this one boxer, claiming that gender ideology had somehow run amok. The various messages I'm showing on screen include wild speculation on Khif's gender identity, completely detached from the evidence that's available. And it's all incredibly weird. In this case, weird might be a bit of an understatement, as it also reflects deeply anti-trans rhetoric that has plagued women's sports from commentators who otherwise never express any interest in it. But while the label of this stuff being hateful might be more accurate, it's the weird label that really seems to stick when it comes to things like this. The thing about being weird is that it's not an inherently bad thing. It really just means something that is unusual or outside the norm. But this brings us to the second reason this has been so bothersome to conservatives, because being called weird contradicts a big part of their messaging, and that's that they are the normal ones.
They know exactly what they're doing. They are running around, pointing at normal people who say and do normal things, and snickering about how weird it all is.
This whole idea of normalcy is to legitimize the various issues that these right-wing culture wars are trying to bring to the forefront. This has been a pretty common pattern going all the way back to the idea of the silent majority, that most people secretly agree with these fringe right-wing weirdos. The problem is that these issues that galvanize the conservative base is that when they're made public, it really reflects how weird it is to be so concerned with them. And it increasingly alienates people who are trapped in this conservative messaging bubble. Anyone who's aware of what politics is like online, in other words, a weirdo, probably isn't surprised to see this transvestigation thing targeting an Olympic athlete. If there's anyone watching this who is blessedly unaware of what a transvestigation is, It's when these weirdos start finding pictures of women and start measuring jaw lines and drawing squiggly lines to try and prove that this person is in fact not the gender they present, but secretly they were assigned another one at birth and that they may actually be a trans person. It's deeply silly and the product of someone who is honestly poisoned by the discourse at this point. The problem with mainstreaming this behavior is it throws a huge spotlight on how deeply weird it is. And that's why this messaging is so effective. It reveals how many conservative commentators have been lying to their audiences, telling them that they're very normal for obsessing over the genitals of female athletes, and their deep concerns over secret trans people is an issue worth discussing publicly, and not something you should honestly realize you're a complete weirdo for talking about. This raises the important question of how these issues factor into conservative politics outside the obvious rabble-rousing, and we can get a better understanding of that by looking at their other political ideas. Recently, I had decided to read up on Project 2025, which is a massive policy and staffing proposal put together by the Heritage Foundation, a giant conservative activist group. You've probably heard of it, but a short explanation of what this is that it's a plan to give the next conservative president the tools and staff they would need to enact a very right-wing agenda. The book that describes this project, The Mandate for Leadership, goes into detail about the various policies that would be enacted if this project could come to fruition. And throughout the book, one of the things I noticed was multiple incessant references to gender identity or diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. You would think these are major topics that the everyday average American is deeply concerned with. If we take a step away outside of the right-wing bubble where all of this was formed, these topics don't quite resonate. The voting record of trans issues has largely been met with a collective shrug in the US. If we look at a poll from Gallup, we can see there are a number of topics that matter way more to Americans, such as inflation, crime, homelessness, the economy, healthcare. These are all issues that matter a whole lot more to people, but most of them are relegated to specific areas of interest within this gigantic project, with the exception of abortion, which is mentioned many, many times, and pretty much every time in an attempt to limit people's access to it. It's very weird to be reading a book of policies that are designed for the next conservative government, and to constantly see these important points being made about how regulations protecting certain gender identities is imperiling the country's national defense, or that diversity, equity, and inclusion programs are somehow harming labor rights. Many of the chapters make reference to these cultural issues, and I want to look at the chapter covering the Department of Labor in particular. It goes into detail on removing various regulations that protect workers on the basis of their identity, and it seems very much within the sort of culture war framework of going after people with different gender identities or diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, basically removing protections from these people. As the chapter goes along, though, the culture war issues become less pronounced, and we see more obviously anti-worker policies find their way into the text. Certain policies that would reduce overtime pay, allow teenagers to be hired for more dangerous jobs, and make it more difficult for unions to organize. There are ideas that are genuinely nice, like providing on-site childcare for workers, but most of these policy ideas are clearly slanted towards employers. And the rest of the policy book includes similar ideas, such as loosening regulations on energy companies drilling for resources, less oversight on military spending, and many other gifts to corporate America. When you strip away these culture war issues, what you really see in a book like Project 2025 and various other conservative plans for the future of most countries is a policy agenda that generally favors wealthy corporations and people. For instance, there's the suggestion that the tax code needs to be simplified with two tax brackets of 15% and 30% and completely forgetting the idea of a progressive tax rate. What this means is that for some of the poorest people, their taxes would be going up, and for the richest, their taxes would be going down. This one policy idea, I think, encapsulates what the vision, or I should call the conservative promise, is for countries like the US. They're working very hard to ensure that the richest among us will get to keep more of their money, and the poorest will have to pay more to make up for that shortage of tax revenue. So whenever we see these culture war issues bubble to the fore, I think it's important to acknowledge them and, of course, stand up for trans rights and the rights of all marginalized people who are usually the victims of these ridiculous stories. and realize that there's more to these weird stories than just hating on marginalized communities. The conservative agenda hurts everyone except for the wealthiest people amongst us. This was a quick video for everyone. I was actually working on a much larger video on Project 2025, but realized it's just a bit too big for one person to handle. And while there's so much more I could say about it, that might be reserved for a stream or something else in the future, because to do it justice would require a video that's something like 2 hours, and I don't know if I have it in me to produce something like that. But I didn't want all that research to go to waste, and then I saw this whole weirdness and Olympic boxer controversy, and I don't know, this idea all just came to me. I hope you all enjoy it, and if you did enjoy it, why not become a patron or a member to the channel? You'll get your name in the credits like these fine people here. You also get early access to my videos and fun extras that I throw in every now and again. If you would like to support these videos in a non-monetary fashion, though, you can like, comment, subscribe, or hit the bell for notifications. Thank you all so much for watching.